I was an export manager. I travelled around the world, and no matter where I went, and I've been to some beautiful cities, but nowhere is as wonderful as New Zealand. I just fell back in love with politics after studying it and remembering actually that the greatest difference you can make is in lawmaking and actually standing for something, being in government and changing people's lives. And I tell you what, if you are worried about people not liking you, don't get into politics, because most of the time 50% of people are going to love you and 50% of people are going to hate you. If I'm happy to have exchanges with people about ideas and policy, that's no problem. But when it's just, she's mean, she's a bully, she's nasty, it's like, actually, I'm just giving as good as I'm getting, and that's what it's like in politics. It's a really tough game. It is very robust, and you have to be ready to argue your point and stand for something. I've never experienced, being a woman, having things happen to me worse than I would have for anyone else. There were a lot of nurses and healthcare workers who were trapped here with their very young children and partners overseas. Now, these were the nurses who were working in our hospitals on the COVID wards, looking after us during the pandemic, and yet there was no pathway, zero, for them to be able to bring their children in. And if you just imagine being without your kid for a few months, then a year, then 18 months, then 2 years, and some of them after 2 years were still apart. So, I mean, I was talking to nurses who had, very young babies, so 3-4 months old, that they'd left behind.
Yes.
And they didn't see them for 2 years. I mean, it was an extraordinary situation, and we fought really hard to highlight that. It was just a huge injustice that we tried to bring up with the government. Got to a point where they just weren't listening, and then finally the government went, okay, actually, we need a pathway for reunification, and they eventually got there. So the one thing that when people say, what's the best thing about politics, I say is, even when you're in opposition, you can make a difference. During that time, there were so many people, both Kiwis stuck in MIQ who couldn't see their dying parents. You had women who were giving birth and having miscarriages on their own. You had all of these things going on, and then the migrants who were unable to be reunited. So I had a huge amount on my plate. I think this will be studied for years, and I don't think we quite understand the full impact that COVID's had on our kids. 3 years is far too short to do anything. You really have sort of that year in between to get things done, and it's just not enough. That's why you have to have 2 or 3 terms to make real change. If you're a lazy minister and you don't read your papers, things will get past you. So it's getting the balance right, and certainly you don't want to undermine your senior officials, but you certainly want to know what's going on on the ground. But at the moment, my whole focus right now is on education.
Yeah.
So we're in such a state.